holding too much cash isn't ideal. What about using home equity? And I know that's something you sometimes recommend before it's needed.
So the big thing here is, so you've done the saving, you put yourself in a really good position. It's just all of that potential withdrawal is going to be taxable.
What can retirees do today to avoid being stuck later?
So it's not just about having enough money, but it's about having access to it. That said, we notice for a lot of our clients that... Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Retirement Planning Simplified. I'm your host, Joe Curry. And with me for one final time is my co-host, Lindsay Wilson. How are you today, Lindsay?
I'm very good. Yeah, I'm good. And this is the final time I'll be on the podcast with you. You'll be on your own for Your Retirement Planning Simplified going forward. However, we should tell people about Business Exit Planning Simplified and that exciting news in July.
Sure, absolutely. So just to make sure everybody sticks with us, we're going to be talking about accessing cash in retirement on this episode. So no matter how well you plan for your retirement income, life has a way of throwing curveballs, unexpected expenses, big one-time purchases or sudden opportunities that you don't want to miss. So we're going to talk about how to make sure we prepare for that before it happens. But yeah, so lots happening here. Business and exit planning simplified. Although by the time this comes out, Lindsay, it's already going to be available. So you should have seen it in your feed if you subscribed. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And that is if you are nearing retirement, but you own a business and you want to make sure you're maximizing the value for that, doing all the right planning, that our podcast is for you. And I also, Lindsay, I just want to say thanks so much to you for all your hard work on the podcast over the last few years.
You're most welcome. I've learned so much, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, the podcast has come a long way since you've came on board, for sure. Our reach has expanded. The show has evolved over time. You've got so many great guests on here for our listeners. So your mark has definitely been left on the show and will be long after you're gone. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Well, you're welcome. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to work on this. The first time I've ever worked on a podcast. So it was a great adventure and great learning, great experience.
Awesome. Okay. Let's jump into our episode then.
Yeah. So we are looking at our first segment is looking at emergency funds and the sleep at night number. So most people have heard of an emergency fund or understand the concept, but what should retirees be thinking about specifically?
Sure. So this is, the kind of the classic financial planning advice. You should have an emergency fund, right? And so the normal financial planning rule of thumb is you should have 3 to 6 months of your expenses in a savings. So most likely a high interest savings account, something separate than your daily banking. And that really still holds in retirement. So it doesn't need to change in retirement. That said, we notice for a lot of our clients that they've been financially successful. They've naturally had a emergency fund. And for them, it's maybe less about 3 to 6 months expenses, but it's what we call that sleep at night number. So they just have a number that they need to have in a separate bank account that they can see, they can quickly get access to, that just, allows them to not feel stress around money. And so there's no right amount to that. It could be $20,000, $50,000, or some clients it's $100,000. So again, there's not really a specific number that needs to be, but if this is going to be your only real access to cash, we should at least have that 3 to 6 months there, but it's okay to be higher. So the big thing here is we just don't want to have so much money sitting in cash that it's affecting our ability to have a sustainable cash flow throughout retirement. So in other words, if we look at your overall portfolio and, we know that what you have invested in the portfolio, designed based on your retirement income style, that it's going to create enough sustainable income to keep you going through at retirement, meeting your goals, living your best life, creating that true wealth, then that's awesome. But if there's not enough there to create a sustainable income throughout your retirement, and you have $200,000 sitting in a savings account, well, we need to reevaluate how we're setting up that sleep at night number for you, because in that scenario, it might not be that you don't have the resources to have the sustainable cash flow you need. It's just that you're not putting enough of it to work.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's basically you're touching on holding too much cash isn't ideal.
Yeah, exactly. So some cash is okay, but it has to be an amount that allows the rest of the plan to work for you.
Hmm. And now, what about cash wedges in non-registered accounts? So, if someone wants flexibility but doesn't want a big pile of cash sitting idle in their bank account.
Yeah, so some people might just want to keep most of the money in their portfolio. Might feel like if they have if they can easily access it or too easily access it, they might spend more than they want to spend. So they don't like having that 3 to 6 months of cash or a year or whatever it is sitting in their bank account somewhere that they can grab it. So they might have it inside, say, their non-registered investment account. So in there, we have the portfolio, again, that we've built based on your retirement income style. And then if you have a defense bucket, rather than having maybe all of it in low risk bonds or having some GICs in there, maybe we're keeping some cash in there as well. And so the amount, again, is going to depend on the person, but it might be that 3 to 6 months, or it could be a couple of years, right? So it really depends on the person, but that is an option for where we can easily access cash. Now, what we don't want to do though is we don't want to have that cash sitting in our tax-free savings account, especially if we have a non-registered investment account, because in that scenario, we're just wasting that valuable tax-free growth potential. So in the non-registered account though, I mean, that's no different than a savings account. So that would be the ideal place to have if there's going to be any excess cash sitting around.
And what about home equity lines of credit, or as we call it, HELOCs? What about using home equity? And I know that's something you sometimes recommend before it's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So setting up a home equity line of credit. So just to differentiate a regular personal line of credit versus the home equity line of credit is because it is registered against your home and it's secured against your home, I should say, you're going to get a lower interest rate on that. So that's why we want to have that. And also you're going to get a higher amount that you can borrow. So we want to make sure that's what we're talking about here specifically. And so even if you never plan to use it, having that home equity line of credit in place doesn't mean that you're carrying debt. Like you can just keep it at a zero balance. And it really just adds flexibility to your situation, right? So let's just say that, you're retired, the portfolio is creating income the way you want, everything's going pretty well, but then your car dies and you go out and you're going to buy a new car now, but you look at financing, you don't really want to buy a brand new car where you're going to get a good financing rate. You found a good used car, a couple of years old, but the bank's going to charge you 8% interest on the loan to buy that. So you have the money, so you want to purchase it, but the money is tied up somewhere else, or maybe investments are down, Lindsay, and you don't want to lock in losses to take this lump sum out. So that home equity line of credit, it gives you flexibility. You could take the money from the home equity line of credit, purchase the vehicle. In this scenario, obviously it could be an emergency. It could be any use where you need the cash. And then we just create a plan for how we're going to pay that debt back off. So in those scenarios, maybe you have too much in your RSPs, or all your money is maybe in your RSPs, your RIFs. So it's not that the money's not there again, and maybe markets are even looking good. It's just that if you take all that money out to purchase the car, you're going to have a huge tax bill. And maybe that means also old age security clawback or some other potential issues there. So we might look to pay off that home equity line of credit over a few years, right? So again, the main thing here isn't that you're planning to use that home equity line of credit. It just gives you an option if you need to get your hands on cash and your other options aren't ideal at the time.
Right. And now what about RSPs, taxes, and liquidity, and the liquidity problem? Because this does bring up a big problem. What if most of your money is locked in RSPs or RIFs?
Yeah, so this is actually kind of a good segue from what I was just talking about, where that home equity line can come in handy is if all your money is in RSPs, for example, like that's all taxable income when you take it out, right? So might not be ideal for a big lump sum to be taken out of an RSP or a RIF. So home equity line of credit is one way around that. But if you retire, and I mean, it's not uncommon for us to see, an RSP with $1 million in it, but between a couple, $1.5 or $2 million. So you've done the saving, you put yourself in a really good position. It's just all of that potential withdrawal is going to be taxable. So when you don't need the money is when we want to start planning, how do we create some more flexibility in your spending? And so this is where, I've told this story, I think, on the podcast before. Last year, one of our clients needed to purchase a car. Same example I was just giving, actually. And they originally retired, which was before their spouse. They had been putting all their money into RSPs, which was fine because they were in a higher tax bracket. It made sense. And so the spouse was still working, but she was making enough in order to pay the bills and, maintain things. So he didn't need to pull money out of his RSPs, but because he wasn't working, he's in that low tax bracket. We had been pulling money out of his RSPs every year, moving them over to tax-free savings accounts. He ended up having a little bit in his non-registered as well. And anyway, so he needed to buy a car, found the car he was looking for. It's the same example I just gave. It was a couple of years old. Financing didn't make sense. But now, because we had been thinking ahead and moving that money over to tax-free savings accounts, he had a lot more flexibility where he was able to take the lump sum out of the tax-free savings accounts, pay no tax, and purchase the car. And so now, with just over time, we're topping those tax-free savings accounts back up. So there's an example of just planning ahead to give you some flexibility in your spending, so you're not forced to have a big tax bill. At the same time, you're spending more than you expected out of your portfolio.
Yeah, and this actually touches on our next point, is about planning ahead for flexible spending. So what can retirees do today to avoid being stuck later?
Yeah, so I think we probably just kind of summarize things here. So, have an emergency fund is a great, standard financial planning tool or strategy. So get that 3 to 6 months in your savings account. If you need more than that for your sleep at night, no problem. Just make sure it's not affecting the amount of money you can spend in retirement. Number 2 is if you don't want to have as easy of access to that because you're scared you might spend it a little too quickly, more than your plan will allow for, then, using the cash wedge. And you might already have a cash wedge otherwise. So maybe we just top up the cash wedge a little bit more than you may otherwise need by, say, an extra 3 to 6 months of expenses. And then you can still get your hands on that pretty easily. You just have to move it from your investment account over to your bank account. And there's not going to be any tax consequences to do that either, right? So it's pretty easy, but it's just one extra step beyond your savings. Getting that HELOC or that home equity line of credit in place to be a backup source of funds, right? So it just gives you that flexibility. Make sure you don't have to disrupt your plans or your investment plan when things aren't going well. Make sure you don't have to pay too much tax when you need a big lump sum. And so strategic withdrawals, what we're talking about around planning ahead, right? Getting money from the RSPs and the RIFs, particularly when you're in lower tax years, which we often see in your 60s when you're kind of in that transition of retirement. One spouse may be retired, the other not, or you've retired, but you haven't started a CPP and OAS. There creates some opportunity there to move money from the RSPs over to tax-free savings accounts, or if those are full, your non-registered accounts. So really, just like anything else we talk about, Lindsay, it just comes down to having a plan. And this is also one of those examples where I think time and time again, when we talk to people based on their experience, they think that a retirement plan or a financial plan is an investment plan. And that's just one small piece of the planning process. And so this is just an example of another piece that goes into your retirement plan along with your investments and all those other things to make sure that whatever happens in life, as we say, life happens, you're prepared to handle it in the best way possible.
Absolutely. So just a reminder that even with a solid plan, flexibility is what keeps retirement on track. And then if you want to offer any final thoughts on this.
Yeah, so it's not,
or action items.
Yeah, for sure. So it's not just about having enough money, but it's about having access to it when you need it, doing it in the most efficient way, right? So plan ahead, have a plan in place. And so the other thing, Lindsay, for all of our listeners, I created a checklist, the 9 ways to access cash in retirement without derailing your plan, which is a bit of a summary of this episode. But if you wanted to kind of have a checklist to work through like things to consider, you could just email us info@retirementplanningsimplified.ca and we'll get you a copy of that. So Lindsay, I just want to say one more time, thanks so much for all your work on the podcast and being my co-host. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, it has. And thank you. And thank you to all our listeners. Thanks for joining us and for letting me be part of the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
All right. And before we sign off, Lindsay, just let people know, I guess Fourth Line Theater will be your next
thing.
So
if you're in Ontario and you're you feel like you're in the Peterborough area or you're in the GTA or driving distance, Fourth Line Theater in Millbrook, Ontario, there is a show this season called Wild Irish Geese, like the bird, by a local writer, comedian, and actor, Megan Murphy, and directed by Kim Blackwell. And it is about it is the story of the Irish migration to this area. It's a 200th anniversary. of some very brave people who came from Ireland to settle here. And it's a pretty remarkable story. So that'll be this August, and I am in it.
Awesome. Break a leg, Lindsay.
Thank you. Take care.